What up, nerds? So I'm late to the game, and I understand that. I really don't have anything to add to the conversation because I haven't seen the movie, nor do I plan on it because I know I'm gonna hate it. Is that self-prophesying? Kind of, but I also don't care. What movie am I talking about, do you ask? Dear Evan Hansen movie. And I'm not gonna talk about the movie like I said because I haven't seen it, but I want to talk about something that I have noticed from watching other videos about people talking about it. And I'm going to start off this video, as always, by prefacing things. To get a little bit of backstory so you know where I am coming from. So firstly, I was obsessed with this musical when it first came out. It came out when I was in college. It really affected me. It was really profound. I loved it. I was obsessed. And I haven't really lost love for it as much as I've just kind of moved on from that part of my life. I'm also not really into musicals anymore, which is something I could talk about later. Dear Evan Hansen was like the last musical that I was like extremely into. This is also being recorded before I do a deep dive into Hadestown, so that remains to be seen. So when the movie was announced, I was like, oh, that'd be cool, it'd be kind of fun. I wasn't psyched with Ben Platt playing the character, and the things that I have heard about why this musical was made makes me dislike the decision even more. But as a whole, I really didn't have a preference one way or another. I was excited to see how they would expand the story, because in a movie, you get to do really cool things with expanding the story in terms of point of view and visual things that you can't really do in theater. So I was excited for that. And again, I haven't seen the movie, but the clips I've seen sounds like it didn't do that, which is fine, because I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people's reactions. And the thing that I've noticed about the audience reviews is that you can divide them kind of into two groups within the arts group specifically. And I have a little note card, I wrote it down, so I actually have like a video essay thing instead of just me talking. I'm very proud of myself, please be proud of me. And what seems to be the big divide is between creators and artists. To define the terms, the creators are the people who aren't necessarily focused on one style of media. They're people that kind of get their hands in on everything. They look at the story or the piece of art they're making from kind of a top view, world overview, instead of being hyper-focused on their individualistic media. Artists, on the other hand, in the way I'm describing it, are people that are focused on one particular art and don't really branch out outside of it. In realms of theater, those categories can be broken down more into general arts kids versus musical theater kids. These also can be described as those who prefer plot and those who prefer spectacle. And defining the terms for plot and spectacle, there are two terms that Aristotle came up with way back in the day about like the essence of theater. And plot is the story structure, what happens, the characters, etc. The spectacle is kind of like the finesse around the plot, the things that make the plot interesting. So like the scenery and the costumes and the magic that happens in theater and media too, that create a way more entertaining story than if you were just orally telling it. And what seems to be happening within the Dear Evan Hansen audience reviews is people debating that plot versus spectacle. Because a musical is a great way to tell a story, but in terms of realism, in terms of realism, it's not realistic. People don't break out into song and dance. It's a reason why people don't like musicals. It's because they're taking out of it from that aspect. Dear Evan Hansen is a musical that kind of can blur that line because it's grounded in what we perceive as reality. So it's a little more believable for inner monologues and soliloquies to come out as music, and it's a little more, it can take you out of the story more, but it kind of gives a more realistic telling overview versus like, I don't know, The Music Man, which is also grounded in our reality, but it's also leaning way more towards spectacle than plot. And when it comes to the reasons why people disliked and liked this musical, boils down to their preferences in how to do theater. So for instance, the casting of one Mr. Ben Platt. It seems to me that a lot of creators, a lot of people who are theater kids but they're not hyper-focused on one aspect of theater, didn't like the casting choice. And that could have been from the age, it could have been from his performance, it could have been from having better options available. Whereas people who are more artists, those who are more focused on one particular section of theater, or they're just musical theater kids, seem to like Ben Platt's performance. Because Ben Platt is a stage actor, he's not a film actor, I think. I haven't seen him in a whole lot, but that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. This musical was fine for translating into film. They just decided to try and recreate that theater magic, and that doesn't work because theater magic and film magic are different. Another thing that seems to come up in Discord and debate are the changes they made to the musical movie adaptation. The two videos I want to highlight, the two that I watched almost back to back that gave me this idea, are one from Schaeferless and one from Mateo. They talk about Ben Platt and they talk about the changes to the musical. It's bizarre on how two storytellers can see the same piece of media and have two completely different reactions. Schaeferless is somebody I would consider more of a creator, and he did not like the changes. He hated them. He thought they were dumb, it took away from the story, and overall, essentially the plot and the meaning of the show. Whereas Mateo, who is more of an artist, I feel, liked the changes. He thought they were good. He thought it helped focus the story, helped it keep it centralized on Evan Hansen. But it seems like the changes they made were more for the spectacle of the movie rather than the plot. They were more focused on getting Evan Hansen honed in there, getting a Ben Platt performance, getting emotion out, pulling this emotion out of you versus letting it happen naturally because of the plot. And I think Mateo is the one that brought up the marketing aspect, which again is a huge thing. I think if they would have marketed the movie differently, we wouldn't really be having this discussion, because you can throw a million fireworks up in the air and you're gonna get a spectacle, but if you don't string them through in a coherent way, it's just gonna be lights in the sky. And I think what this movie boils down to is, one, a lost in translation between theater magic and movie magic, but also the differences between plot and spectacle, how different forms of media can highlight different things. Really what they should be doing with movie musicals is what Anna Karenina does, and even what Hamilton did on Disney+. Because theater magic isn't going to work in a film setting. You need to use movie magic in the theater show if you're going to make it into a movie. Because that movie uses movie magic, but it is told almost like a play or like a musical. It's just so cool. It is just so cool. And then of course you have the way Hamilton did it, which is just filming a stage version, which honestly everybody wants. Everyone just wants professionally filmed Broadway shows. I know why we don't do it, but we all want it. I told you I wrote everything down on a note card, but I don't think it really helped. As expected, your girl can't have one coherent train of thought without going on side points and side stories. So everything kind of deteriorated at the end of that video, and I'm here to kind of make it a little more clearer to understand. Even though the video would have been fine without me having to butt in and kind of clear up the pieces, it just made more sense in my head to come in and kind of lay out a few more things and then neatly tie it up with a bow, versus kind of having to split things back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and only I would understand it. So, movie magic, theater magic. Pretty well defined terms. They are devices used in a show that are the practical effects that the audience considers magic, whether it's moving set pieces, subtle edits, what have you. When collaborating to make a show, it's important to know what medium you're in. If you don't, you get something like Dear Evan Hansen, which is hellbent on being a theatrical production when it is in fact a movie. This is the same process and reason why a lot of movie-turned musicals aren't good either. However, it seems that the only people concerned about these tonal differences are the creators, those general arts kids. Things like editing choices and story beats are going to get picked up by them because they're the ones that have the overall process, versus those musical theater kids, which are only looking at the performances, which the creators are as well, but the performers seem to be more forgiving about the entire movie's experience because they only care about those performances. Not care about, focused on. That's what they're focused on. I don't want to make it sound like the just musical theater kids are bad, because they're not. They're important. This whole video and topic is just to discuss the various subcultures in the entertainment and art business and how it affects the big budget productions. Because Dear Evan Hansen isn't the first bad musical movie. Dear Evan Hansen, for all of its flaws and triumphs, is another spit-out, raced-over production that is trying to capture a magic that only happens in one kind of medium. The creatives are seeing it, and it's only going to cause more strain and heat in their relationships because these products are subconsciously pitting them against each other. Subconsciously, we're choosing sides. Those that prefer plot,
those that prefer spectacle. Dear Evan Hansen is just another example of this, and I truly do hope it gets better. Because plot and spectacle don't need to be fighting against each other. You need both of them to make a show, and you need both artists and creators to make a really great show. If anything, it's just another case of these big budget movies really not caring about their own product. That they're in the business of telling stories, and they don't even seem to be wanting to tell the stories. But until everything gets sorted out and everything is fine and everything is in harmony and we can look at a movie musical or a movie turned musical and love it, please be kind, enjoy what you enjoy, and remember that you are you and that's enough. Bye!